You got this.
All right. Is it recording?
Yes.
Great. Let's let them in.
Hey.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're excited that you've joined us today. Just getting everyone in the room and then we will get started. Thank you so much again for joining us. Morning, welcome. If you would like, you can go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know what you teach, who you are, where do you teach, so we can kind of see who's here with us today. Right. We have just a few more people coming in from the waiting room, and then we will get started. Welcome. It's exciting to see a variety of grade levels here today too. Welcome elementary. We always miss y'all.
I was going to say, I was excited to see those elementary teachers joining us.
We love secondary also, but I'm also really excited to see elementary here.
Yay.
Awesome. So we are going to go ahead and get started as we've got a lot of things we hope for you to take you through today. And we really want to be able to give you time to explore the frameworks because that is going to be our focus today. So welcome. As you can see, we're going to talk about navigating science learning. And are you looking for a map? And we hopefully have a new framework out that will help you navigate science teaching and learning. My name is Heather Johnston. I am the Director of Secondary Science and Engineering Education here at the State Department. I've been here one full year. This is one full circle. I'm loving it and I'm really excited to be here.
I am Susan Ray and I'm the Director of Elementary Science and Engineering. I also serve as a science specialist for Oklahoma Excel, which we will tell you about later on in the presentation. But welcome, excited to see you all.
Hi, I'm Donna Schweitzer, and I am one of the science instructional specialists, and I came on board when the standards were in the process of revision and have continued to see that through to frameworks and help Heather with it.
Super grateful. Samantha Shepard is our state science assessment specialist. She has another meeting that she had to attend today, so could not be here. But if you ever have any assessment questions, this is her contact information, and we will provide this slide deck later on as well, so you will have that. One slide I didn't make, but I do want to call her name out is we have our math specialist from Oklahoma Excel, Gina Barnhill, is with us also today. And she is our tech person in the background. And so we are deeply thankful for her and her support through the presentation.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. Before we get started, we thought we would go through some norms that we would use throughout the session. And we would love it if you haven't already that you introduce yourself in the chat box and let us know a little bit about yourself and where you teach. We would encourage you to ask questions and share ideas, and we will have several people monitoring the chat. So if you feel more comfortable putting those there, that would work. And it would also give us the ability to answer those at a later date. Again, we would like for you to use your webcam and audio to engage in small groups, although if you're having some difficulties, you can also let us know that in the chat as well. You can personal message any of us. Please mute yourself when you're not talking so that we don't get a lot of feedback. And again, feel free to use the chat box to ask questions that you may have throughout the presentation. We also just wanted to talk briefly about Zoom controls. Most of you at this point after the pandemic are pretty much experts on it, but just in case this hasn't been a platform you've been using, along the bottom row are where you have some components that you might want to be familiar with. And one thing is the participants button and the other is the chat. If your chat button isn't been clicked, you may not be seeing the chat. So you may want to do that and go ahead and open it up. And if you want to rename yourself, you can go up to the participants button and click that and then rename yourself. Sometimes if you're on someone else's computer, it defaults to their name. And so we really aren't sure who we're talking to. All right, next thing, we want to know who's in the house. So who is in the house? And if you don't recognize this map, this is the state tourism map. And so it is divided up into quadrants. So Heather is going to launch a poll. And if you would please select which represents your location currently. We still have a few more people that are responding. And I hope you guys can see the results now, and it looks like we are represented. We have actually got somebody from every quadrant in the state, which is just incredible. And I think that also speaks to the fact of it being digital. It gives us a lot more opportunity with a large representation from Central Oklahoma and Northeast Oklahoma. So welcome all, no matter where you're located. Okay, on this next slide, what we would like to know is your level of experience with the new Oklahoma academic standards. They came into place and then we entered the pandemic, and so a lot of us were just trying to figure out how to do online and everything else, but they actually have been out for quite a while. So we'd like to know if you've had an opportunity to look at them, if you've had an opportunity to think about bundling and coherently sequencing them. So where on this scale would you rate yourself? As a novice, competent, or an expert? And again, this is thinking about the new standards. Okay, and it looks like Heather's sharing the results, and it looks like the majority of you still considered yourself to be a novice with the new standards, but if you were using the previous set of standards, I think the transition is going to be relatively easy for you. It looks like a mid group of you rated as competent, and some of you are experts, and I do recognize some of these names. I think you've worked on the framework, so you probably are elbow deep into the standards. And welcome to all the first year teachers too, on those that have just completed their first year, because what a time to enter teaching. Okay, this next one is the frameworks are actually not new. We have redone them to correlate with the new standards, but the frameworks have been around for a long time. So this question is just asking how many of you have experience with the science frameworks, including the old ones? Is it that you've never heard of them? You knew it was there, but you really didn't ever click on them, or you've used them a lot in the past. So I'm going to ask you to take a poll just to see where we are on recognizing that the frameworks even exist. Okay, so it looks like about 10% of us have never even heard of them. So today, hopefully, you will understand their location and how they're used and get some new insight to that. A lot of you know about them but have never used them. And then it also looks like a large number of you have actually used the OK Science frameworks. And it is a link on the OSDE page, and that it actually takes you to an external area where those are housed. So we will kind of talk a little bit about that today as well. But again, welcome. And I think that you will be excited about some of the things you're going to see today. Okay, Heather, next slide. Okay. Last year was a very, very tough year for many teachers, students, administrators, and there were lots of transitions going on. I know lots of worrying, lots of unknowns. But now, as the numbers drop, we have to consider what learning will look like post-COVID. And so that is what this survey question is about. How do you gauge your readiness for post-COVID learning? Are you not ready? And you can think about you individually or your district, maybe, or we figured it all out. I mean, I know that some districts have started transition plans and about how gaps will be handled. Okay, it looks like Heather is sharing the results of that. And it looks like some of you are not ready at all. And hopefully today you will take some tools with you that will help you feel a little bit more ready. And then some of you are sort of ready. And I think that's to be expected as we transition back to being in the classroom. And there are some districts that stayed in the classroom. And then there are always those that have figured it all out. So, but hopefully today you still will have some takeaways that you can use when you get back to the classroom. So with that being said, let's talk about the session. The overview for today, we're going to talk about the revision of the Oklahoma Academic Standards, the OASS, which were revised in 2020. And we're going to explore stage 1 of the new Oklahoma Science frameworks. And then we hope to navigate and post some COVID science teaching that will help, tips that will help you leverage the framework. And with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Heather.
All right, thank you so much, Donna. We're going to talk a little bit about what changes were made to the Oklahoma Academic Standards for Science. They were adopted last year in 2020. We know that we've been discussing this for a year now, but just in case you missed one of those talks, we did want to highlight some of the things that did and did not change. By state law in Oklahoma, all subject areas do revise their standards every 6 years, which is why we did last year in 2020. We want to remind people that our standards are informed by research. And so the latest research was put out by the National Academies of Science, which is called the Framework for K-12 Science Education. That was published in 2012. We adopted standards informed by this in 2014, and then last year we revised those standards based on what we had learned within those 6 years. Things that did not change within our standards, we are still three-dimensional science teaching and learning, meaning we have 3 dimensions embedded within our standards. The first one being science and engineering practices. This is how students do science. We have 8 skills that we like to focus our student development within. These are the first 4. They're listed in no particular order. Remember, science is not a linear process. You can move within these in a variety of ways, depending on where you're starting. And so these are the first 4, and these are the next 4. They just couldn't all fit on one slide, but we still have all 8 of the science and engineering practices. The second dimension is the disciplinary core ideas. This is the one that we are usually more familiar with, as it is the science content pieces. We hope that the students are discovering, learning this information through the investigations, and they are divided into 3 domains: our life sciences, like biology and environmental science, physical sciences, which is chemistry and physics, and then the earth and space sciences. And then the last dimension, which is my personal favorite, are the cross-cutting concepts. This is how we can help students think about science. And so, you know, we always get that question. It's like, I don't even know where to start. I don't even know what I'm supposed to be looking at. And these cross-cutting concepts can really help direct student thinking, from looking for patterns or cause and effect. Energy and matter is actually becoming one of my favorite ones, as I see how that's weaved throughout all of the grade levels. And so it's just really interesting to see that one progress as students grow in their understanding of science. And Donna is going to talk about what did change.
Okay, there were many shifts that were associated with the new standards, and most of those came about in the fall of 2019. We started having stakeholders meetings because we wanted these standards to be representative of what teachers and educators in Oklahoma wanted. And the first one was the addition of play-based pre-kindergarten standards. Pre-K plays an important part in Oklahoma education, but up until this time, we had not had standards, and so we actually met with pre-K groups. We had pre-K teachers on board to actually write those standards, and we'll take a closer look at those in a second. The second major change that we noticed was changes within the middle school grades. Formerly, the standards, we had certain standards associated with each grade level, but there wasn't a strong connection between them. And so that was revisited, and although it was painful, the decision was made to correct the problem this year. And then the third one was we looked at how relevant are these standards for the students, and is it clear as a teacher what I need and what skills I need to be presenting to students. And at times it really wasn't. So some of those statements were rewritten to make it the clarification more solid. Okay, talking about the play-based pre-kindergarten standards, we it's reflected, the play is reflected not only in the standard, as you can see, this new standard PKS1, it says engage in play to explore the physical and natural world. But in addition, we wanted the clarification statements to assist pre-K teachers with what that play base might look like in the classroom and what students should be doing. So we've highlighted here in the green box the particulars of that, which could include building towers with blocks, interacting with balloons. And again, it's not meant to be inclusive, but just some suggestions for those that might be grappling with, well, how do I begin to make that happen in a pre-K classroom? Okay, then the next one we discussed was middle school. And you could see the bubbles in the blue, PS11 and PS12, were in 7th grade. And these had to do with chemical reactions, and PS13, 15, 16 were in 8th grade. So again, when we went out to stakeholder groups, one of the things that we did is took all the middle school standards in one bundle, and we took off the grade off of the cards and asked people to group them up by how they would group them if they were teaching. And some interesting things evolved. And then when the writers did that, some interesting things evolved. So Heather, so what happened was after analyzing it, it became evident that it would be much more cohesive to have all of the standards that dealt with chemical reactions bundled together. But unfortunately, that would mean moving standards. But the decision was made in the best interest of student learning and for teachers in developing lessons. It was time for that to happen. And so what happened was all of these were moved to the 7th grade, which meant some others had to be moved to the 8th grade as replacement. But I just want you to know as you look through those that there was lots of thoughtful discourse going on about where it was appropriate and age appropriateness. And it did result in some shifts, though, in middle school that we will see. Okay, then talking about high school, one of the things that came up was in the past, for instance, with the physical science, they were all named PS. But this year in the new standards, when you look at them, you will see the nomenclature has been changed, and the standard will actually be preceded with the subject that it goes with. So the one on the left is a physical science standard, and the one on the right is the chemistry standard. And if you look at the standards, this isn't always true, but in the case of these two, the standard stayed the same for both subjects. However, when you look at the clarification statement for the two subject areas, there are differences. So again, thinking about rigor and the depth of understanding, you'll notice that the chemistry clarification statement added more detail. For instance, in the periodic trends, we actually call out specific trends that you might not necessarily cover in a physical science classroom. It also, on the chemistry side, we discussed about the prediction of the products and added some additional reactions. So again, to give chemistry standards a little bit more depth and rigor, those changes were made by the committee. Okay, and then even on the assessment boundary, and remember this is the same standard, but the assessment boundaries are written a little bit different. And you can see that in chemistry, we included polyatomic ions, which would probably be appropriate for a chemistry class, but the writers decided for physical science not so much. So you are going to see some individual differences. And again, I would encourage you, even though the standard may look the same, to look carefully if you were teaching both chemistry and physical science, because there may be differences in the clarifications, assessment boundaries, and sometimes in the standards themselves. Okay, in the new standards booklet, or online, now it's digital, you can download it, and you will notice that there has been a change to the layout. So it's going to look a little bit different. The first thing that we're going to call to your attention is this is where you will find the grade or course name. Okay. The second thing is you will find the disciplinary core ideal category. And I always use those when I was working with it because I think it tells you a lot about the angle that the standard is coming from. And I would encourage you, if you haven't looked at those, to look at that. So this one's going to have something about to do with forces and interactions. The third thing, of course, is going to be the performance expectation. And then the next items are the clarification statements and assessment boundaries. Then the next thing is the science and engineering practice, and this is what your student should be doing. The disciplinary core idea is the topical matter that the student should be learning. And then the last area is the cross-cutting concept, how students are thinking about the core ideas. For those of you that were very familiar with the old standards, one thing that might stand out to you is a slight color change. And again, this was a decision that was made by various committees, and we wanted it to more accurately reflect what we saw in the national frameworks and NGSS. And so the old DCIs were green in color, but now they're orange, and the old CCCs were orange, but they're now green. So if you happen to notice that, you're not being deceived. That color change really did happen. Okay, and I'm going to turn it back over to Heather.
All right, so let's talk about the frameworks then. So some of you are familiar. We noticed from the poll that the majority of you are aware of what the frameworks are, but we did have some that this is your first experience with it. And so in the chat box, we're going to give you about a minute to think of your answer. And then as a waterfall chat, we'll all hit enter at the same time. If you accidentally hit enter before that, it's okay. Don't worry. But think about these two questions. What would you expect the science frameworks to contain? Or what features would you hope the science frameworks to have? The framework revision project is a 3-phase project. So as we go through today, some of the things that you hoped that were there might be coming later, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But if you just take a moment, think about your answers to these, and then we will all hit chat together or hit send together. All right, if you have your response, go ahead and hit enter. Read through them. Awesome. I see answers of like possible phenomenon. It's great. And continuity within the disciplines, mapping, examples of student-led investigations, student actions, teacher actions, different types of bundles. Awesome. And so we asked this question of our writers as well, and Donna might want to explain a little bit of this.
Okay, so our Oklahoma Science Framework writers, I just want you to know that applications went out for those, and we had independent committees that rated blinded applications, and that's how individuals were selected. And the reason why I'm saying that today, because Heather's at the end is going to discuss with you, we are looking for writers for the second part of it, and we would encourage all of you to apply. So just like you, we asked the framework writers before they began their work, what was the purpose of frameworks and how teachers would use them. And these are some of the ideas that they came up with. And it's reassuring to see that their ideas pretty much are spot on with what I saw in the waterfall chat. So they wanted them to provide guidance and resources to facilitate the standards. They would like to include information on how to determine students' understanding of them. They noted that new teachers feel very, very overwhelmed, and so they wanted this to serve as a guide to assist them so they didn't have to take on so much on their own. And they wanted it to provide examples, timelines, and clarification. And I think I saw all of that information in the waterfall chat. So it looks like we are very well aligned with what the framework writers came up with. So the science standards, again, were revised in 2020, and then the call went out to redevelop the frameworks because they had to be rewritten so that they were aligned with the new standards. And one of the things that we wanted them to do is provide more support. And the other thing that we were thoughtful of is at the elementary level, because many elementary teachers teach all subject levels, we wanted them to be somewhat congruent with what teachers saw in the other frameworks. So if I taught math and science, that they didn't look totally different. We also noted that there was a lack of frameworks for some subjects and grade levels, and those were primarily at the secondary level, but you have already noted that we did add standards or performance expectations for pre-K, and we are adding frameworks for that as well, but also for environmental science, earth and space, and also for physics if you've been waiting for that to appear. So you will see those as well. Okay, the Oklahoma Science Framework Project, initially we had to break it up in phases, and part of that has to do with how the grants are working and the monies that are available. And so the phase 1 is now complete, and when you look at it today, what you're going to see is the performance expectations, of course, and those will be bundled, and you will see a bundle analysis introduction along with how the framework writers suggested they be bundled. And then we have in a nutshell that gives you an overview. Teacher actions are brand new for the first time, student actions, and then the key concepts which come from the national frameworks, along with some misconceptions that teachers may want to think about, ponder, and address with students.
All right, so let's discuss what we're going to do in our first breakout room. We're going to begin exploring the science frameworks, and when you visit it, it is going to look a little different than the original ones. So what you'll notice is when we get there, you'll have the landing page, and we're going to be focusing in on those 2020 standards. If you notice, the 2014 science frameworks are still there, and that's because our state assessment is going to be aligned to the 2014 frameworks this next school year. And so the standard 2014 standards. And so we still want teachers to have access to those particular bundlings. If you're still using the 2014 standards for one more year, we didn't want to completely remove those. So our focus will be the 2020 frameworks. And when you select any of those grade levels, everyone has a home page that looks exactly the same. The minor changes would just be what the introduction is. Obviously, 6th grade is going to look a little different than a high school course or an elementary course. But what you will see are 3 categories on the right-hand side. These are all new. And in our first breakout, we are going to focus on these 2 categories. And then we'll look at the vertical learning progressions a little later. We are going to be using Jamboards together to explore the frameworks and share our thinking. And just in case some people are not familiar with Jamboards or how to navigate this particular app, we wanted to go over those controls. And so up at the top, you will find all of the different frames which you can navigate in between. We're going to focus on the toolbar. That's really what you're going to be using today. And in this toolbar, the main tool that you will use is this particular one, which is the sticky notes. I love sticky notes. It's my favorite thing to use in person. And so Jamboard being able to use sticky notes is a nice way to make this virtual. When you select that, a sticky note does pop up. You can type in your information and then you will select save. This sticky note image though stays there until you hit cancel. But when you hit save, what you will notice is a image will pop up in the background. And that is where you'll find your sticky note, and then you can actually move that all around. If you want, there is also a pen option. Say someone else write something that you agree with. You can use the pen as like a check mark next to it. If you want to be like, yes, at +1, I agree with what they're saying. You can also use the pen there. And then each of the frames that we are going to be working on is titled frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, and so forth. So in our first groups, we're going to be working through frames 1 through 5, but we'll provide those directions in just a little bit. But because that language could be new to you, we did go ahead and label that so you don't have to look at the tinier numbers up there at the top. So when we're exploring the breakout rooms, the first thing you're going to want to do is open the link to the Oklahoma Science Framework. So Gina will be dropping that in chat so that you have access to it. And then we'll open up the Jamboard links in just a moment. When you get to your breakout room, introduce yourself so everyone kind of knows who's in there, and then spend a few minutes to individually explore your frameworks. Because they are all set up the same, you do not have to be in the same grade level or subject area to be able to work together in this. They have the same home pages, the structures of the bundles are the same, so you'll have a lot of common things to talk about. After a few minutes of individually exploring, go ahead and discuss your answers to the questions on frames 1 through 5. So really you're just going to be looking through and taking a look at like, what did you notice about your home page? What's on there? What is the standards and bundle analyses? There's just a few different topics that we want to draw your attention to within the frameworks. Use your sticky notes to share your thoughts. When you are doing this, you can do whole group thoughts or you can have individual thoughts on there. It is all okay. But when we get into breakout rooms and using the Jamboards, your room is going to be sharing Jamboards. So you might start seeing answers pop up on the screen and just know that that's okay. Someone else is typing in there. We're just collaboratively using these boards so that, I only had to make a few boards versus, 25 rooms worth of boards. It was just much easier to do this. So Gina did go ahead and dropped those links into there. Now, how do you know what room you're in? Well, when we get into breakout rooms, you will see it pop up and it'll say joining room and it'll give you some room number. And that reflects which Jamboard you're going to use. Those directions are already in chat. But if you select a Jamboard that's different than the room you're in, just know that that's okay. They all are the exact same and you can still interact with the Jamboards. Any questions before we get into the breakout rooms? All right, you're gonna have 15 minutes to work together as a team. When you are in the breakout room, if you have any questions, there is a like call host or ask for help button, basically is what it is. Feel free to select that and one of us will come join you. All right, thank you. We'll see you soon. All right.
Good job, ladies.
Did you want to pause recording while they're in their breakouts or just play through?
Yeah, we can pause.
Okay.
Welcome back. Just gonna wait a moment as everyone rejoins us. If I can find the right screen to share. Welcome, everyone. Welcome back. Hopefully you got to spend at least a little bit of time looking at the frameworks. Again, we apologize for the back and forth at the beginning. I'm sure everyone understands how technology can be sometimes. All right, so hopefully you did get to spend some time looking at the frameworks and providing your thoughts in there. But we would love for someone to share out, what did you notice, how my bundling standards support science, teaching, and learning, just some of the highlights that you noticed. You can put them in chat or place your name in chat if you would like for us to call on you. We can call on you that way. Yes, the Jamboards are they're saved. It's a Google thing, and we will be going back through and looking through your comments. Absolutely. Thank you. The navigation. Yes. Thank you for pointing that out. That was something that was highlighted as an issue before about trying to navigate the different pages. So we did want to make navigation between them much easier. So I'm glad that that worked. Easy to use. That's good to know. Oops, sorry. What were anyone's thoughts on the bundling? Does that kind of make sense? Did the bundling look helpful? Great. We also love to hear about the elementary connections. We really did try to model off of math and social studies. ELA, as you may know, they are going through the revision process of, or just finished, newly adopted standards for them, and they'll be getting into the frameworks, which is the only reason why we didn't reference them, but awesome.
This is Deanna Durson, and I do have a question.
Yes.
On the State Department of Education site, there's wonderful live link documents for 6th and 7th grade science, but I couldn't find the one for the 8th grade. Is that coming?
So the 6th and 7th interim frameworks were meant to bridge the gap last year until these came out. An 8th grade version is not, but that's because what you see in those interim frameworks from 6th and 7th grade is going to be a part of phase 2. Donna and I and Susan worked on those last year, but we didn't have time to include teacher voice. And in phase 2 will be teacher-led. The writers will come up with those resources and will provide a lot more guidance and support along those lines. But if you ever have questions about 8th grade, please contact us and we will connect you with some fabulous 8th grade teachers as well, and some sites that we used for those 6th and 7th grade interim frameworks. But yes, phase 2 is coming. Phase 2 is going to have resources like you saw in those 6th and 7th grade ones. Okay, so hopefully different things that you may have been able to highlight as you were going through was the new engagement strategies page where we linked ideas for supporting student sense making, supporting different types of learners. That's going to be expanded upon in phase 2 as well. We just wanted to get some introductory ideas into the frameworks for phase 1. We did provide examples of ways educators might bundle standards, but please remember that this is just one example of doing this. This is not the only way that you could bundle ideas within the science standards. So it's just an example to give educators some ideas on how to do that. The In a Nutshells do provide some overview of what those bundles will look like. We do have new teacher actions and updated student actions within the bundle analyses that are in there. And they are color coded to match the science and engineering practices and cross-cutting concepts for the standards in that bundle. And then we do list some misconceptions, but we want to point out, remember, we want to help students revise those misconceptions through learning experiences. So they're just things to be aware that might have students confused, and through an investigation, we can help revise that thinking so that they internalize that change and hopefully hold on to the more accurate idea rather than the misconception. So then the next piece that we are going to look at is how do we use these frameworks to support post-COVID science teaching and learning? Now, we know some of you were in school all year long. Some of you were hybrid, some of you were completely virtual, some of you were a little bit of everything and going back and forth. So we know that districts are going to be in different places. One thing that we do have in the frameworks that we're going to be looking at next is this three-dimensional science vertical learning progressions document. I'm very excited about this section. We've had these documents before, but they were PDF format. They're now digital in here and a little bit easier to navigate. And we're going to take a look at how these vertical learning progression documents can really help support unfinished learning that may have happened due to the last year and a half in teaching. Just in case you didn't know we had vertical learning progression documents, we did want to say that our science standards are designed for students to build on and revise their knowledge pre-K through 12th. So students learn a little bit of something, they move on to another grade level, they'll build on the big ideas, might not be directly, could be indirectly, depending on what the topic is, but all of our dimensions, the science and engineering practices, cross-cutting concepts, and those disciplinary core ideas have a learning progression. And so we do have documents that help identify, if I am in 3rd grade, what did students learn before me in this topic? What will they learn after me? Or if I'm in high school, what did students learn in middle school that could potentially be connected to my ideas, or maybe another subject area within high school, like the physical sciences, on how those could potentially build off of each other. So we will be going to spend about 10 minutes in the breakout room looking at just these vertical learning progression documents. So when you, oops, as I drop the screen, when you get into your breakout room, Gina will drop the link here that will take you to this page, the vertical learning progressions link. Now on this page, there's a little introduction, but you will see that we have the 3 dimensions, SEPs, our DCIs, and our CCCs. And you can see that under each dimension, we have listed the different concepts or domains, practices, and so forth. When you select one of those, what you will find is the learning progression for that particular concept, whatever it happens that you clicked on it. This one's asking questions and defining problems, and you'll see that we have them grade banded. And then you'll look at how they progress from asking questions from kinder and 2nd grade all the way through 9th and 12th. So you can spend a little bit navigating together or individually as you go through there. And then again discuss the answer. This time we're going to go to frame 6, and it's really looking at how could we possibly leverage these learning progressions to help students with their unfinished learning. So when I was teaching, I did chemistry, right? And I'd want to know, what did kids pre-chemistry should they know from me? Probably not a whole lot, but they did learn a bunch in middle school, like we saw at the beginning, where they learned all those chemical reaction concepts in 7th grade. They would have built on some of those ideas in 8th and in 9th grade. We know that science and engineering practices and cross-cutting concepts are the same across all grades. So while chemistry talks about energy a little differently, what have they learned about energy before? And how could I potentially embed this later? So that's kind of what your topics will be looking at. How do we use these to our benefit and help students continue their learning? Because we know they learned a lot last year. And while it might not have been everything, we can still value what they have learned and build upon that. And then with the sticky notes, again, you'll just add your thoughts when we get into there. You're going to go back to the same room. So hopefully you're familiar with the people that are in that room. If you have any issues while you're in there, you can call for help. We'll come jump in and join you. We're happy to do so. Gina, if you would put the Jamboards back in there, thank you so much. So in your chat right now, you should see a link for both the Jamboards and that science frameworks. If you didn't close out the links before, you could already have those open. So we're going to break out for 10 minutes and we will see you back in just a moment. Welcome back, everybody. Just give it a moment as everyone is making their way back. Welcome, welcome. So we're going to talk a little bit about what you saw within those vertical learning progressions. Feel free to put it in the chat. You can write your name in the chat if you'd like for us to call you, or feel free to unmute and share. But we'd kind of like to discuss, like, how might these vertical learning progressions be leveraged to support unfinished learning for this year, and really any year. Helpful for teaching more than one grade. We did see that several of y'all were teaching like all of elementary. Can't imagine. I can't ever imagine just teaching one level at elementary. Gina and I both worked at Putnam City, but I used to tell her, I don't know how you guys do it. All the subject areas in one grade level, it's amazing. But yes, it can be useful. Checking for understanding about prior knowledge. It's great. That's a great place to, when you're trying to activate that prior knowledge, knowing specifically what prior knowledge you're looking for is always really helpful. More in depth. Identifying things where we can help close gaps. Progression. Yes, those are all wonderful things, is what we were hoping we were getting at. I love them. I really love the changes we've been able to make this year in that document, where it'll hyperlink you specific to that specific standard, even if you're looking for more information. Yes, really looking for those skills and concepts, you know, that come before and after, helping us frame, like, what should kids at this grade level really understand to support and embed prior skills and concepts. We know students learn things, whether it's in a year of COVID or not, and giving them access to something that they know and connecting that to what they're going to be learning in this new subject or this new grade level can really help build that confidence in students and going to see you do know science as you're going through. So one thing you may have noticed as well in the frameworks on the right hand side, you're going to see this icon that says send us feedback here. Say you are working through the frameworks and you notice a link doesn't work, so it's a broken link, or a link takes you to a page that it shouldn't have. For instance, 8th grade in biology. So working within this website, the 8 and the B look really similar. And I had linked 8th grade to biology standards and biology to 8th grade standards. So I do hope I have fixed all of those things. But if you find issues like that, there is a feedback form on the frameworks page where you can identify the location of the issue and giving me some more description to help find that, and we can go in and make that change. One thing I want to do before we transition towards the end of this is I really want to thank the framework writers. Our phase 1 framework writers have done an immense amount of work across the last 5 months on top of everything else that they were responsible for this year. And I want to highlight those educators that did get to work on these bundles. This was educator led. Donna and I and Susan, we were there as support and guidance and a source of feedback, but they did all the heavy lifting. So we are deeply thankful for their hard work these last 5 years. We had teachers from across Oklahoma. This is slide 1 of 2 of all the different writers that we had involved. Oops, there was slide 1. I just went a little too far. If you want to learn more about them, on the main frameworks page, there is a Meet the Writers slide deck. So you can kind of get to know them a little more about what grade levels they taught and really what their views are on science teaching and science education. And so we will be providing a link to the slide deck later, right at the end, but these were just highlights of things that we talked about today, our academic standards, the frameworks, and then the Meet the Phase 1 Writers slide deck. This is just a little summary page of those particular links that we used today. Now I am going to pass it over to Susan.
Okay, very good. Before we actually move on to talk about the next steps in frameworks, I personally want to take a moment to thank Heather and Donna for their diligent work the last 3 months in phase 1. They put in so much time and effort, and I think it's important for us to thank them for that work. This resource really supports all science educators and leaders across our state and sometimes other states as well. So thank you so much. As we were looking in the chat and all the things you guys were mentioning that you would like to see in the frameworks, well, there's great, exciting news. If something was missing that you would like to see, there is a phase 2 coming very soon. We hope to work, the work will begin tentatively on this in October with applications opening in July. So we would love for each of you to apply for those to be a part of that work. Phase 2 will focus on instructional resources that support the new bundle analyses. And with the release, with that release, we hope to have it ready in the spring or summer of 2022. And here you see more science resources to actually support your work. We have the OKSci toolkit. It actually supports the implementation of the Oklahoma Academic Standards. We also have OKSci monthly newsletter where you'll find professional learning opportunities, lessons, and resources aligned to standards. If you have not signed up to receive that newsletter, please make sure you do that. And finally, we also have the OKSci Facebook pages where you can collaborate with Oklahoma educators. There are also resources for state science assessment. We want to remind you that the state science tests will be aligned to the 2014 Oklahoma Academic Science Standards this school year, and they will be aligned to the new 2020 standards beginning 2022 to the 2023 school year. If you have any questions about that, please contact Samantha Shepard. She is the science assessment coordinator. And as I mentioned when I introduced myself to you, I am also the science specialist for Oklahoma Excel. I work with what we call a network improvement community, which are teachers basically across our state working to improve their practice. Oklahoma Excel provides job embedded, collaborative, year-long professional learning. We would love for you to apply to join us next year. Our deadline for applications is July 2nd. We also have other focus groups, and Gina, who is on our call, is our math specialist. She heads the Excel math group, and we have ELA, and our new group is our early childhood education group. We have professional development awards still available for that. And if you need more information, you can visit our website, or you can also contact Gina or myself. We would love to talk to you. And our final resource is the Ready Together Oklahoma resources. They support students through the pandemic and then beyond. Here you will find state initiatives, guidance documents, and many more resources, and also webinars that you could watch. And finally, we would really like to thank you for attending this session today. Before you leave, we would really appreciate hearing from you. We want to hear about future learning opportunities as well as feedback on how you felt throughout this session. So maybe think about, how do you prefer to attend these learning sessions? And what topics would you like to learn about? We really want to provide you with the things that you need. And so we'd also like to know how this session went. So please complete the survey. Gina will link that survey in the chat. Give you a moment to open that. And then if you have future questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to Heather, Donna, or myself. We would love to answer any of your questions and help support you in the work. We appreciate all the work that you all put in daily for our students.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you guys so much for coming today. We really do appreciate your time. That survey link that Gina shared in the chat box also has a place towards the end that if you are interested in the Oklahoma Excel program or the phase 2 writer applications, you can submit your name, and when we will directly contact you when those are available, or we can contact you with more answers and links and stuff for Oklahoma Excel. If you're looking for the PD certificate, Gina placed that in the chat box as well. If you miss out, like forget to click on that or something happens, you can always email us and we can get that sent to you. And then we have also provided that slide deck. So everything that we have talked about today, if it was blue and underlined, it is hyperlinked to that resource. So if you were looking for a way to sign up for the OKSci newsletter, that link there where it says OKSci newsletter is hyperlinked to sign up to that particular document. So again, thank you so much. We're going to stay on for a few moments as I stop sharing. If you have any questions that you would like answered, feel free to unmute. I'm going to stop recording.